About the biggest problems facing our country, our tendency is to break them down into silos. We think about the root causes and how things have changed over history, and it's just easier to approach them differently and separately. My approach to solving for legacy cities does just the opposite. By combining the very serious challenge of racial injustice and climate change into one proposal I call Legacy Cities Off the Grid. Legacy Cities Off the Grid is a reckoning for past environmental transgressions and racial injustice. It would permanently revolutionize the relationship between legacy cities and resources that they already own and take a serious bite out of our carbon footprint, thereby addressing climate change at the same time. Before I go into the particulars of the solution, I need to talk about the problem. Starting with particulate matter. Particulate matter is tiny stuff, airborne, and it floats on the air that we breathe. It's made out of solid and liquid particles, and it's fatal. It's a carcinogen. It causes lung cancer, premature heart attack, heart disease, pulmonary disease, and it kills people. It's killed people in Gary and likely in every other legacy city in the country that is similarly polluted. The American Lung Association gives the city of Gary, Indiana, and Northwest Indiana as a whole an F in our air quality rating. That is the lowest quality rating you can get for air that is still breathable. Study after study has shown that people of color living in legacy cities suffer disproportionate health risks and early fatalities caused by environmental pollution. One study shows how a 10-mile difference in where you live can change how long you're expected to live by 33 years. Environmental racism is a concept that we use in the environmental justice movement, and it's used to describe how different pollution levels tend to concentrate in different areas of the country, often with a racial overtone. A measurable difference in pollution-related deaths is all the evidence we need to support this demand for compensation. In our civil justice system, as opposed to our criminal justice system, we compensate people who have been injured by unintentional acts and unintentional consequences, as opposed to the criminal code where it has to be intentional. Recent decisions for environmental crimes and pollution-related injury bears this out. In 2016, British Petroleum was ordered to pay $20.8 billion in compensation for environmental crimes. But how is money from these fines used? Is it actually used to benefit anyone who's been harmed by environmental pollution? Or might there be a better way to structure a remedy that would change the relationship with victims of environmental crimes and their environment for good? Structuring an environmental remedy will require every legacy city to consider what resources they already have. In Gary's case, it's land. And I suspect in the case of a lot of our legacy cities, like Baltimore, Detroit, and Cleveland, they also have excess land because we have thousands of acres of abandoned, industrialized land. 52 square miles is a lot of land for a city to control. In Gary's case, we are almost 80% larger than most of the cities around us. And that's a big deal when you come to municipal resources, because instead of generating income, the city of Gary and other legacy cities have to provide services within that geographic boundary. Expensive police, fire, which come with pensions and service contracts, code enforcement, etc. These are expensive services, and the larger a city, the more expensive it is to provide those services. What if there were a way to set aside our excessive land in Gary and in other legacy cities that, instead of costing the cities money to service, would actually generate enough income for the city? It would reduce the amount of money we have to spend on police and fire and code enforcement and start to generate revenue in a way that can permanently change the finances of municipalities. I'm talking about giving power to the people, specifically wind and solar power. The transformative potential of solar and wind power in Gary and in other legacy cities starts with the receipts, and it's solid. People in Northwest Indiana pay an average of $211 a month for their utilities. Now, Gary may be slightly more because we're colder, we're closer to Chicago, but statewide the average is $211 a month. You annualize that, take it times the number of households we have in Gary, and you can see that the residents of the city of Gary alone are paying nearly $80 million a year to NIPSCO. NIPSCO is our local energy provider. If you do the math in Cleveland and Baltimore and Detroit, you'll see similar numbers, and you'll see what the profit potential is of having your own utility. My Legacy Cities Off the Grid proposal would change the state statutes throughout the country to allow legacy cities to develop their own municipal utilities, powered by wind and sun that belongs to everyone, situated on land that legacy cities already own, that can never poison anyone again. The receipts start with wind. We have a lot of wind farms in Indiana and all over the country. If you look at this map, you'll see that most of them are to the south, well, all of them are to the south of Gary. The global offshore wind industry is projected to hit $1 trillion by the year 2040. The thing you need to understand about wind, which this illustrates, is that it is extremely lucrative. The map will show you that the wind farm that's closest to the Illinois border, that's called Fowler Wind Farm, and it is one of the largest onshore wind farms in the world. Right next to it is Meadow Lake Wind Farms, and they reported that they've paid $59 million to their landowners, which are by and large farmers, through the year 2019. $59 million a year would put Gary in the black within 2 years. The American Wind Energy Association reports that wind energy is transforming rural budgets throughout the country. One town in New York, Sheldon, New York, completely eliminated their municipal taxes and completely got rid of their local taxes because the wind energy supplied all of the energy and money that they needed. I'm saying if wind energy can transform rural budgets, it can transform legacy city budgets, because we are the ones that are sitting on thousands of acres of toxic, unusable land, and we are the ones who are subjected to the environmental toxins in the first place. Another resource that legacy cities are already sitting on that could be monetized is solar energy. Solar generation is the fastest form of electric generation in the country. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that solar installing is the fastest growing job in the country, and it starts out paying about $42,000 a year. People sometimes think that solar power is best reserved for warm states like Texas, Florida, California, Arizona, but that's not true. Guess where the biggest solar farm airport in the country is? It's in Indianapolis, a couple hours south of us. That went over so well in 2013 that the next year they put in a huge solar array at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Solar development is all over, and legacy cities need to grab it right now while we're transitioning to wind and solar. The timing is perfect. There are plans underway that are just about 20 miles south of Gary. There's a company out of Chicago called Invenergy, and they have plans to turn a 1,400-acre plot of land into a solar energy farm. With that 1,400 acres, the Northwest Indiana Times reports that they are going to pay the landowners $63 million a year in lease payments. If the land is worth $63 million a year, imagine what the energy is worth. And keep in mind, 1,400 acres are less than 2.5 square miles. Think back to the slide that shows how big Gary is, 52 square miles. Cleveland and Detroit are even bigger. If we could set aside 2.5 square miles, compensate those landowners very handsomely, that tiny amount of land relative to the rest of the land mass would support our city well into the future and sustainably and indefinitely. Do you know who the biggest investors in wind and solar development are? It might surprise you. It's the fossil fuel companies. ExxonMobil, BP Oil. Go to their websites. Just put it through Google. You will see solar arrays and wind turbines. And there's a reason for that. Capturing wind and sun is a lot cheaper than blasting through the core of the earth, digging, fracking, putting an ocean freighter out in the middle of the ocean to drill. Think of the manpower, the equipment, the time, the money, and it's destructive. Even our local NIPSCO, that's the provider of local energy, projects that they will save $4 billion by retiring the coal-fired plants by 2028. If you think that NIPSCO is providing energy only to this limited geographic region of North Indiana, and that they're going to save $4 billion by getting off of coal-fired plants, imagine what they're making. The thing we have to get our heads around with wind and solar and renewable energy is that unlike what's coming from a finite sphere of the earth via fracking, fossil fuel, coal extraction, mining, etc., wind and solar energy are all around us. They are literally in the air around us, waiting to be captured, and the technology definitely exists to do just that. The issue also is that wind and solar and renewable energy don't belong to these utility monopolies. They don't belong to fossil fuel companies. They belong to all of us. They are amenities that belong to every person who inhabits a spinning ball circling the sun. Of course, capturing the energy isn't free. The expertise isn't free. In fact, it's quite expensive. But there is no shortage of third-party companies who would love to do business with the city of Gary and other legacy cities to help us transition to renewable energy. After all, that is their life's mission, to get us to convert to renewable energy while there's still time. All we have to do in the state of Indiana and in other states that have regulated monopolies is change the statutes to allow legacy cities to go into this business and provide energy to their own citizens. In conclusion, our country is finally going through a racial reckoning that is long overdue. At the exact same time, scientists from the UN, NASA, and scientific communities all over the world are warning us that we have to address climate change. The UN just came out with a warning this week saying that if we don't address climate change, we will be facing catastrophic consequences that we cannot reverse within the next 9 years. Changing state statutes throughout the country to allow legacy cities to establish their own municipal utilities, servicing their own residents on land that they already own, utilizing wind and solar that belongs to everyone, will permanently revolutionize the finances of our legacy cities. It'll bring economic compensation to largely Black and brown communities who have been poisoned by environmental transgressions of the past, and it'll save our planet at the same time. Thank you.